Okay, so some of the basic tools that we're going to need to service KS dropper we'll go over here. If there are additional or specific or specialty tools for your particular model that we're going to go over, we'll discuss those in further detail a little bit later on in the video. So you want to start with a good quality biodegradable degreaser. We tend to like the Simple Green cleaners here. You can dilute them down to whatever ratio you want. They wash away easily, and they're not caustic or damaging. So a good degreaser. For lubrication, we recommend either the KS Post Paste, or if you don't have that available, the Slick Oleum is basically the same formula. It's designed specifically for suspension use, more specifically air oil systems, so it's a really good lubrication to use. We don't recommend using automotive grease because they tend to be a higher viscosity and can cause poor performance of your dropper if you use those. A pair of soft jaws so that you can hold the seat post. The one that we have here happens to have a round clamp hole in it, but if you can't find one of these in your local market, you can also do a V-block, which a lot of times you can get those from Amazon or from a local hardware store, a machine shop supply. Those kind of places have them. And essentially you just need something that you're going to be able to clamp and hold the tube. If you don't have access to that, don't panic. You can also use the bicycle frame to hold the post in place while we unthread the collar. We'll go over that in a little more detail later. Utility knife, we generally will use this just to help us remove the guide bushings. So these are handy to have. If you don't have one, you can do it by using your fingernail, but I'd recommend if you can find a utility knife, definitely grab that. A set of Allen wrenches. So you're gonna need from a 6 down to a 1.5 millimeter set. So they can either be a T-handle like this, or you can have one of the little pocket folding ones work great too. But just make sure they're good quality so you don't end up rounding or stripping out any of the bolts. Last would be a strap wrench. And the strap wrench is basically to remove the collar. You'll need these on nearly all models of KS dropper, with the exception of the A12 Integra and the Rage I. So those two will use a little different system that we'll talk about later. But the strap wrench you can get from most hardware stores, and they're generally used for fitting pipes that you don't want to do damage to. So if they're a chrome finish or something, these allow you to grab and turn pipe without damaging the surface. So local hardware stores, and again, this is called a strap wrench. And then we definitely like to use a microfiber towel for cleaning and the internal parts and everything. These work really well with the degreaser. They tend to take all of the debris off of your post. So you can get these through most hardware stores, or if you have a Costco in your area, they do their Kirkland brand of towels that work really well. Okay guys, for the new Rage I, we're going to talk about how to service this and also the additional tools that we didn't talk about in the beginning that you'll need for this post. So one thing that you'll want is a snap ring plier. This one is adjustable internal, external. If you are buying one that's not convertible, you want to make sure you get one for an internal snap ring. So it's going to squeeze the snap ring inward. So when you squeeze the pliers, it squeezes them inward. So you'll want that. You can get this from most hardware stores, Tool Supply, that kind of thing. The other thing that we want to have is a shock pump that has a 600 PSI max pressure capability. Some shock pumps don't go up that high, so make sure when you're sourcing your pump, you get one that goes up to 600. We may need to run up to 520 PSI in this post, so you want to make sure that the pump is compatible. KS does make one. The model is the Air 8, and these are available through your local KS dealer. Okay, so the first step that we're going to do for servicing is we're going to go ahead and take the head off, or clamp off, I should say, not head. Just going to unscrew those. Be careful you don't lose the barrel nuts, because they are loose once you take the bolt out. Okay, we're just going to set that aside. And then there is a cap there. You can check that pressure now if you want to. I think we're gonna, for the video, we're gonna go ahead and check it at the end before we put it back together. But just be aware that that's where the air goes into this when we refill it. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and use our soft jaws and clamp this into our vise so we can loosen the collar. If you don't have a good pair of aluminum soft jaws, you can also use a couple blocks of wood in your vise. Just be careful if you're doing that you don't over tighten and squeeze it. These being round inside do a better job of holding the whole outside of the tube as opposed to just squeezing on one small spot. But you can do that. You can also source just V blocks that don't have a round hole, but they have kind of a V shape that'll lock in, and those are readily available from a lot of hardware stores. So, okay, so we'll clamp this here. You know, I'm gonna flip this around just to make it easier for you guys to see this. Okay, so we'll tighten that down. Then we're going to use the strap wrench we talked about earlier, and again, most hardware stores have this. We're going to put that around. Now, one thing you want to make sure is there's no grease or anything, oil on this collar before you go to use the strap wrench. If you get oil on this rubber here, it's going to slip and you're going to have a hard time getting this off. So make sure both surfaces are clean before you use it, and then just a good sharp turn. It's going to break that loose. Okay, we'll unthread that. Okay, now our wiper seal is here. Our bushing actually stays down here in the post right now. It's not attached to the seal collar on this model. We're going to go ahead and take this back out. Set those aside. Now we'll take our snap ring pliers. Okay, you want to catch the inside of those, and you can see we just popped that out. Now the easiest thing to do is just tap this on the table, and you'll see this starts to pop out. I'm going to set our snap ring aside. Okay, now on the actuator assembly, you have two clips that hold that in. I just like to use the edge of my snap ring plier and grab a hold of it like that, and it just pops them right out. Okay, set those aside. Set your actuator aside. Now, this push rod can come out, so be careful if you do that, you're going to end up losing it. So I would take that out and set it aside so you don't lose it. Okay, our next step will be to just go ahead and pull it apart. Now, you don't want to pull real hard and damage the bushing, so just pull, and you can see it pops out pretty easily. We're going to set the mast tube aside. I'm going to take our utility knife, and if you look at this bushing at the bottom, there's a split, and if you just grab a hold of it, it'll pop right off. Okay, we're going to set that aside. Now we're going to take the edge of the knife, like I did here, and pop the guide pins out, and we'll slide the bushing off, and then we're going to slide our wiper seal off. Okay, so what I did there is I rotated that slightly as I pulled it off because it wants to catch that edge there. Okay, so now we're going to use some degreaser. I like to use Simple Green. We're going to degrease the inside of the wiper. Okay, and we're going to check that surface and make sure that the seal doesn't have any cuts or damage to it. You want that to be, you want it to kind of feel like a sharp edge there all the way around on the rubber. If it feels very rounded, then it might be a good time to go ahead and replace that wiper seal. But if it all looks good, then you can go ahead and set that one aside. We're going to clean the lower band bushing here. And what we're looking for on this is any deformation. We want to make sure these edges are clean and straight. If there's been any damage done to it at all, it's time to replace it. Okay, and then we're going to clean our main bushing here. Now what we're looking for here is any excessive scoring inside. This does, once it pushes in, you'll see there's a slit here. It does actually size down once it's pressed in. So if you were to slide this over the stanchion now, it would feel loose. That doesn't indicate that it's worn because you have a gap here now. Once that goes together, it's going to tighten that up. So don't worry about this fitting tight. Just look inside and see if you see any heavy score marks, like deep scratches or really blackened surface. If you do, it's a good time to replace that. Lastly, we have our 3 guide pins. And what we're going to do here is we're going to clean these, and then you want to kind of visually inspect them and look for any flat spots. The other thing you can do is if you lay it on a flat surface, like a piece of glass or something is really good because it's super flat, but we have the anvil here, and as I roll it, if it feels smooth and there's no stopping as it rolls, you're probably in pretty good shape. Generally, if these wear, they're going to wear from sliding inside the system, and they'll kind of wear a flat spot on them. So as long as they're round, and in good shape, you don't need to replace them. You could just go ahead and clean and lube everything. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do is clean the mast. And the best way that I found to clean this is just take your microfiber rag, push it in there. You can use the push rod, or if you've got something else in your shop that you can use to push that rag down there. But I pushed it down the one side and got it to get about 3/4 of the way in that way. Do it this way too. Okay, and then just as you move it in and out of there, it's gonna, those little microfibers do a really good job of cleaning the inside out. If you look in there and it's clean, you can just stop there. Just needs to be clean and free of debris and dirt. If it's still really dirty, you might want to spray some degreaser in there. I will caution you, if you use a degreaser, make sure you get it very dry inside before you reassemble it. If you leave degreaser in there, it will break down the new grease you put in, and you know the service life won't be very long on the post. So, okay, so we've got this all clean now. Last thing I would do would be to inspect your stanchion cartridge assembly and make sure that there's no damage to the cartridge itself. Make sure that everything looks good. Make sure you don't have excessive oil leakage. You will have a slight amount of oil weep. That's normal. But if you have a really big buildup of it, you may have some issues. Also check here for damage. If any of that is scratched or looks like it's leaking oil excessively, it'd be a good time to replace the cartridge. So then we're going to just degrease this, wipe this all down. It's also a really good idea, while you have this out, to just use a screwdriver and the microfiber to get in here and clean out these slots where your guide pins are going to sit. The reason I say that is if you have a bunch of grit built up in there and you put that guide bushing back in there, that grit is going to take up space and it's going to make these really tight, and that'll make your post feel sticky or not smooth. So make sure you clean those out while you've got this apart. Now we're going to take our suspension lube, either Slick Honey or KS Post Paste or Slick Oleum, and we're going to go ahead and lube the inside of our seal collar. This has a double lip. What we're doing here is we're filling the cavity between those lips. Okay, and then we're going to push that on. Now be careful when you push this on. Kind of rotate it. The reason is this has a fairly sharp edge on it, and if you don't rotate it when you push it on, you could possibly damage the seal. So just be careful. And then give it a little slide, make sure everything feels good. Next thing we want to do is we're going to take our guide pins, and you're just going to pick 3 positions on here. So we'll do one here. What I did is I put some grease into the groove, and then I set the guide pin in. That holds it in place so you don't have to fiddle around with it trying to hold it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to skip one and go to the next one. We're going to put a guide pin in there, grease it up, skip one, go to that one. So by doing this, we end up with a guide pin in every other slot. Doesn't really matter which 3 slots you put them in, as long as you put them in alternating. You don't want to put two together and then have some missing. So just make sure you alternate every other one. Okay. It may be easier for you to slide this on before we put the guide pins on, but I'm just going to show you how to do this in case you did put this together like I did with the guide pin. This will split open, so I just open it up around the guide pins and slid it on. You may, like I said, want to just do it before you put the guide pins in so you don't have to fiddle with it. But then what I like to do is just put a little grease on the bottom part of this stanchion so it's pre-lubed when we put it together. Now, a little trick that I found on this band bushing is if you take your screwdriver and you just start, you can see I'm rolling that over that screwdriver, and essentially what it does, it's like putting a piece of metal in a slip roll. It makes the roll tighter, and the advantage to that is, and if you don't have the screwdriver, you can also just roll this up like this, kind of squeeze it down small, and then let it open up. And of course, what that's going to do is that's going to make that piece just want to stay in there, right? It kind of spring loads it to the closed position. Now I go ahead and put some grease all on that. Set that aside for a minute. We don't need to put grease up here where the bushing goes in because there's nothing sliding there. So what I'm doing is putting the grease past that area, and I'm just rotating the post around my finger with the grease on it, and that just deposits a nice load of grease. If you get a little grease on that seat there, it doesn't matter. It's not going to hurt anything, but there's no reason to put a lot of grease in there. Okay, now we're going to slide this in, and I will tell you, you're going to have to kind of turn it around and move it till you get that band bushing to go inside, because that's recessed back. And then you notice I'm taking my 3 fingers and holding those bushings in, and just turn until you feel it slip past. Okay, then we're going to slide the bushing in. Okay, sometimes it's a little fiddly. What I did there to kind of help is I used the seal collar to push the bushing evenly, because it has a split in it. If you're pushing just one area, it's not going to want to go in as a unit. But once you get it to slide in, it'll go in really easy. But that catch on the very first part of the edge is sometimes a little challenging. Okay, so I just go ahead and slide this up and then thread it back into position. And then before we go further, we're going to take some degreaser, and we're going to wipe the post down, and especially this seal collar. We're going to go back to our soft jaws. Give it one more wipe because we want this really clean. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and snug that up. It doesn't need to be super tight. Just, you saw there, just that little turn so that it doesn't back itself out. But if you over torque it, sometimes it can be a little hard to get out the next time you go to service the post. Okay, so we'll set this aside for a moment, and we're going to look at our actuator. So it's a good time to check the actuator for any kind of wear, any damage. A lot of times these have either like a fiber grip that when you installed your post, they got in this, or maybe has grease, depending on how you prep the seat post when you put it in the frame. But it's a good idea to just degrease it. If you have access to an air compressor, just a little shot of compressed air, get any dirt or debris or grit out of there. If you don't have a compressor, no sweat, you can just get in here with your screwdriver and clean everything out. Okay, so we want to just check this, make sure everything looks good, no damage or anything. I'd also take these clips and take the time to clean those now. Okay. Another thing we want to check is our snap ring. Make sure that it's in good shape, not bent or damaged. And if you notice on the snap ring, the way that these are manufactured, they're stamped, and so one side has a little radius, one side feels a little sharper. What's important is when we install this, the sharp edge needs to face outward. That way that sharp edge grabs the groove that's in your post and locks in really good. If you put the rounded edge on instead, there's a chance that if it didn't seat 100%, could pop back out. So we want to make sure that that sharp edge faces outward, and we'll go over that again when we go to put it in. But while you're cleaning it, just take note of which side is which. And I would just lay the sharp side up so when you're putting it together, you don't forget about it and put it in backwards. Okay? Next thing we're gonna do, it's not necessary, but I like to do it just as a little bit of precaution or extra measure, is I just put a thin layer of grease on this compression rod, and then I like to clean the push rod and put a coat of grease on it. And I just make sure I get the whole thing coated with a thin layer, because that'll do two things. One, it makes it run smoother in there, but two, if it's covered with grease, it can't rust. And so if you do happen to be riding in inclement weather and any moisture gets in there, that's just extra insurance that you're not going to have any rust. Okay, so the next step we're going to do is we're going to kind of wiggle this around, and you'll feel it kind of thump and drop into place. And so once it's dropped into place, we're going to take one of these clips and push it in, and then it's a little fiddly. We're going to rotate it around. I'm trying to make sure you can see this as well, but we're going to pop the other one in. Okay, now what I like to do, just to get them seated well, is I'll take the vise and gently, and I can't stress gently enough, gently tighten it down so it pushes both of these in. Okay, and then you'll just go ahead and pull this in, and you see that started to seat. If you have trouble getting that to go in, what you can do, again, I can't stress gently enough, but gently put that in and then rotate it like I just did there, and then a little tap. And that seats it in. Now, we want to make sure that the cap went all the way in so that where the snap ring attaches is exposed. And so, again, the sharp side goes up. Okay? Now, if you look at the end of this, we're going to turn the two holes for the snap ring away from where the loop for your cable goes, and that way we can pull with our thumb, pull that up and let the snap ring drop under those hooks. Okay, we're just going to drop it in, and you'll kind of feel it click when it goes in. You can also take the screwdriver. Sometimes I like to just take the screwdriver and rotate this slightly just to see that it follows the track and it's fully seated in. Okay, and then what you can do to make sure this is in there solid before you put it back in the bike is give it a few taps and just make sure that that impact doesn't pop that snap ring out. If it does, it means it didn't seat properly and you need to do it again. But that's a good way to just ensure that this is all together properly. Okay, our last step. If this is dirty inside and you see any kind of debris or anything, spray it out with some degreaser. And this is really helpful to have the air compressor to blow it out. If you don't have an air compressor, again, screwdriver, microfiber. It's important though to get this clean. The reason is if there's debris here and you open this valve and you put your pump on, there's a good chance that the debris is going to be pushed into your cartridge, and that can cause a failure of your air cartridge. So we want to make sure that's clean before we ever take this cap off. Okay, so we'll take the cap off, set it aside. Now with the aerate pump and generally any of the good high pressure pumps, they do have a two-stage valve. So what we want to do is we want to start with this completely open, And what that does is retracts a pin out. That pin is what pushes the Schrader valve to open the valve itself. So by doing that, we thread this on here. Now, no air can leak out. Once this opens the valve, the only air that can come out is into the hose. They won't come out from the threaded area and lose pressure. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and thread this down, and we'll check our pressure. And currently our pressure is at 400 PSI. If you do this, don't panic that it's at 400 or less. It doesn't mean you have a leak. 450 is the factory setting on these, and that 50 PSI actually escaped into the air hose. So every time you put a pump on here and you take a reading, that reading's gonna be lower than what you actually left the seat post set at. So don't panic, that's a normal thing. So we're just gonna go ahead and top it off. I'm gonna go ahead and put 500. Max pressure on this is 520, but I'm gonna go ahead and put 500 in it. Now, we're gonna unthread this black collar here is actually the secondary valve, right? And so when I do that, let that Schrader valve close. So now when I open it, it's not letting any air out of the cartridge and out into the atmosphere. It's only letting air that's in this hose out. That means that it maintains our 500 PSI in the cartridge now. So now we unscrew it, and you hear that little bit of hiss. That was simply, now that let a little bit of oil out as well. That's totally normal. You're totally fine. What I would do in this case is I would put the cap on first. Okay. And once you feel it touch, go about a half a turn. Don't do more than that, because if you over tighten it, there's a rubber seal inside. If you over tighten it, you can crush that rubber seal and cause it to push on the air valve, and then you would cause a leak. So just go to where you can feel it touch, right? Like right there, and then just turn a half a turn, and that's enough, and that creates a secondary seal for you. Now, because it sprayed a little bit of oil out, we're just gonna go ahead and degrease it. I'm gonna use compressed air. Again, if you don't have compressed air, your microfiber and a screwdriver in there, just get all the excess oil out. It won't hurt anything, but it will attract dirt and dust and whatnot to that area, which you don't really want to have. So, okay, and then we'll go ahead and, when you reassemble these, it's a good idea to use anti-seize compound on the metal-to-metal surfaces. So that would be here where it contacts. That would be here where the barrel goes into the post. That would be here where the bolt goes into the head. Okay, same thing, grease here. Or not grease, but anti-seize compound rather, anti-seize compound here. You can use grease if you don't have anti-seize compound, but the grease will tend to work its way out. You're definitely better off to use anti-seize because it'll stay in place better. Now, if you're using a titanium or a carbon rail saddle, it's a good idea to use a little bit of carbon prep. So this is just a paste that has a silica grit in it, and you can, if you touch it with your fingers, you can feel it's gritty. And what that does is it just gives the surface an extra bite, and it's generally used on carbon fiber components so you can lower the clamping force to build friction to hold something in place. Doing this on your rails allows you to torque these to proper spec. When generally it's 10 Newton meters. On this particular post it is a 10 Newton meter spec, and you want to torque them evenly, but using the carbon paste will allow you to clamp at a lower torque and give you better bite, and that'll ensure that your post won't move. Okay, so the last thing I would do on this now is I would give it a little cycle test. So you can use an Allen key. Be really careful when you compress this, because you could damage this if you twist it on an angle, but push it down, okay? And just give it a couple cycles through. make sure everything feels good, and if it is, you're ready to go and put it back on your bike.